A lot of people will say, well, it doesn't look good. It doesn't look like yours or whoever's. And, they'll always be down on themselves. And I'll just be like, this is your art. It doesn't have to look like someone else's, and it shouldn't, it's yours.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Gumroad podcast. I'm your host, Justin Michaelet, a senior writer at Gumroad, where I deconstruct the tactics, strategies, and processes of top creators. Each week on the podcast, I interview creators and digital entrepreneurs who are at the top of their field. On this week's episode, I interviewed digital artist Alaina Jensen. We talked about the relevance of digital art for creators of all kinds, making the mental leap from artist to product builder, the surprising ways artists use Alaina's Procreate brushes, and how making digital art can ease stress and anxiety. This was a fun and educational conversation. Enjoy. Our guest today is Alaina Jensen. Alaina, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Terrific to have a conversation with you. You're a fluid artist, a brush maker, a texture whisperer, a design geek and nerd in your own words. And
yes.
Also, in your own words, a purveyor of pretty. And that is clearly the case with your work. I've seen it on Instagram and on YouTube, and I was blown away by the quality of the art. Hence why I would love to have a conversation with you. If I were to summarize you from your work online, I would say that you are, in one word, a creative, and a creative who serves other creatives. And you even have a tagline of sorts that you've shared, helping others find creative flow, digitally, which I love.
Yes. I'm very passionate about that.
Well, there's many people here who listen to the Gumroad podcast who are obviously creative. And I think we all are from birth. And my goal with the podcast, our goal is to inspire other creatives. And there are many categories of people who are creative online, from comedians to mechanics to historians. Where I'd like to focus our conversation today is digital artists like yourself. And there is a thriving and flourishing community of people who are sharing their digital art. And like I said, again, it's just so impressive, the digital brushes that you have been sharing online. So I sort of wanted to dive in there and talk about what you feel in terms of making a living with that art. And did that start over like a decade period of time? Does it stretch to even before when you started your studio?
Well, yeah, I have been doing it for quite a long time. I started in 2014, and it started out as sort of a hobby. And I wasn't selling brushes at the time. I was selling more like just resources in general for digital artists and for digital designers. Like, I sold digital paper on Etsy. That was like the first thing I ever did in 2014. And it sort of evolved from there. I started selling on other platforms as well. And the brushes, the Procreate brushes, because that's the app that I sell brushes for, and my favorite app to use to create digital art, that started about 2018. And it's just sort of snowballed from there. So, yeah, I don't know if that's what you're looking for.
No, that's great. So let's level set then for those who are not familiar with Procreate.
Yes.
Because I'm in the position I'm in, get to see a lot of behind the scenes at Gumroad. And so I'm familiar with Procreate. And again, if you've never seen it before and you're listening, I just encourage you to go to your YouTube to see what's possible using Procreate. But please share sort of why you chose Procreate as maybe a standard in the industry, and describe it generally speaking for us.
Yes. So before around 2018, I had been using Photoshop and Illustrator, but mainly Photoshop. And I have nothing against Photoshop, but it is a bit technical for people who aren't designers or people who aren't really good with, technical things. So I had been selling, layer styles and brushes for Photoshop. And that was great and that was a lot of fun, but it was really difficult for some people to get involved in that because they just didn't have the technical know-how for it. And the reason that Procreate really stuck out to me when I first started using it, started seeing people using it, is that it's very user-friendly. And that was really important to me. I mean, for me, technically creating brushes and all these things is not a problem, but I really wanted the people using my resources to be able to use them without getting all bogged down by the technical aspects of it. Or, I wanted to be able to explain things in tutorials and so forth in a way that was easy for all people to understand. And so we have people, in my community and people using my brushes. We have people from all different levels of understanding of technical things, like my mother uses my brushes, and she's able to install them. She's able to understand how to use them and just cut out all of that, techie stuff and just get right down to something enjoyable. And also people who are professional artists also use Procreate. So to me, that's one of the main benefits of the app, that it's user friendly, it's easy to get started with, anyone can use it. And that was the main thing, but also the fact that they are constantly updating the app. It's very cheap. I'm not sure what the price is at the moment. I think it's $10.99 or $12.99, something like that. But it's very cheap, and when you pay that, every year or so they will release new updates, and you just get that for free, just as it goes. It's not a subscription model, so I like that about it as well. It's very accessible to many people. Many people can afford to pay that and to enjoy the app from that point forward. So I love that about it. I love how they're always evolving it. And they've just introduced 3D painting. Well, painting on 3D models in their latest version, Procreate 5.2, which just came out yesterday or the day before yesterday. So yeah, there's a couple of things I love Procreate, but those are a couple of my favorite things.
Well, for people in your community and in the broader digital art community, it's self-evident what digital brushes are. But as much as you can paint a picture with words, can you describe what it is that digital brushes enable for artists?
Yes, I've been practicing this a lot with my neighbors and friends, trying to explain what it is that I do. So basically, the app Procreate enables people to use an Apple Pencil, this thing here, and it's to just draw on the screen. And within the app, there are things called brushes, which is basically like you select a brush and then it comes out in a certain way. So, like, you can select a brush that looks like oil paint, and then it comes out looking like oil paint. It interacts with what's already on the canvas in a certain way because of the settings on that brush. And so in Procreate, anyone can create a brush. They can make their own brush, and then they can export that file so that other people can install it and use that brush on their iPad as well.
And again, it seems limitless because you can layer them on top of one another, and the combinations are surprising, to say the least. Well, let me quote something back to you that you wrote that I think will speak broadly to many people listening today, and then connect it to what you mentioned earlier, which is in 2018, you really got the ball rolling in terms of sharing these brushes and developing your art and sharing it online. You once wrote, "When the internet first became a thing, I could see the potential to reach people outside my small circle. And I knew that someday I would make my living that way." And so I quote that now, and then have you reflect back 2 or 3 years to 2018 or so. And you already had a studio 4 years prior to that. But then, rather than just service these clients, you started to share your work in a way that was replicable digitally infinitely. So maybe you could describe how that transition occurred.
Well, the transition to selling Procreate brushes was in 2018, but I would say that the biggest transition so far was actually in 2020, because that's when I started selling on Gumroad. And before that, I was selling these resources through marketplaces to the audiences of that marketplace. And that was great. And it was, it was really wonderful. I didn't really feel like I was connecting with the people that were buying the things I was selling. So I didn't really feel a sense of community. Somebody would buy something and maybe sometime I would hear from them, maybe not. But what really changed was in 2020, in April, actually, after everything started, I made some brushes called Amazing Alcohol Ink. And that's that's something completely, that's another tangent, but it's an art medium, alcohol ink, that is very niche, and it's really beautiful, but it's very difficult to do digitally. So I sort of challenged myself at that point to make some digital brushes based on this medium. And so when I started to do that, because it's such a niche kind of medium, and it's because it's something that had not been done before digitally, I was sort of sharing my process on Instagram and on YouTube a little bit. And so people started actually, following along as I was developing these brushes, and I started to really connect with people. And I love that so much. And as I released the brushes, then people started to share the artwork that they were creating and the joy that they were finding from these brushes and from this type of artwork. And so I think that was a really nice pivot for me to be able to connect with people a lot more and make it really into a community where I'm directly accessing the people buying the brushes. I'm talking with them, I'm sharing with them on social media, they're sharing with me, and I'm really able to see what they're doing, what they're making, and it's really satisfying to be able to see that.
Yeah, first of all, I've seen the alcohol ink brushes, and they are really, really cool. I watched several of your mesmerizing, and many people use that word when they describe your work. They call it not only mesmerizing, but relaxing, and we'll get to that later. I have a couple of questions in that regard. But it seems like your focus sometimes is gemstones, sometimes it's geodes, other times it's landscapes and galaxies and watercolors and plants. It seems like you draw inspiration from a lot of places. But as you mentioned, you started with like Creative Market and Etsy, and then you've now shifted the model completely, almost on top of its head, where you have built your own community on Facebook, presumably other places, but centrally on Facebook. And there's a bit of a network effect built in where you inspire your artistic community. They share their work, and it sort of propagates.
Mm-hmm. Tell me, and they inspire me.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I wasn't even going to go there. But tell me what that feels like from the inside and how you mechanically run that community and sort of give people who are at this genesis level of maybe even considering sharing their art and growing a small community around them, how you do it.
Well, it started organically, mostly on Instagram, when I was releasing the alcohol ink brushes, and I've released quite a few since then as well. And so I was seeing what people were sharing. I really wanted others to see what they were sharing too, because I always have this feeling that, when people are sharing their artwork, I almost get this feeling like it's much better than anything I would have made, or it's just different. It's different. It's really amazing to see someone using the brushes that I made to make something I never would have made, their artwork, their own artwork. And so I really wanted to be able to share it keep sharing it in an organic way. So I would say that the community, we have a Facebook group, and we also have sort of a community on Instagram it's less formal of a community, but like, for instance, like every day I'll go through and look at people who've been posting stuff with my hashtag, Alaina and brushes. And then I'll like repost a couple of them every day in my stories, and I'll tag the person in order to try and get more people over to their page to kind of see what they're doing. So I don't always manage to do it every day, but I try to do that every day on Instagram. And then on Facebook, we have a group it's got about I think the last time I checked, it was 2.2 thousand people in that group. And there's a lot of Procreate Facebook groups. So that's actually kind of a small Procreate group compared to a lot of the others. But I wanted it to be a place where we can really focus on abstract art made in Procreate, because there's a lot of artists who do very technical drawing with very detailed drawing and realistic drawing. And that's not something I know how to do at all. It's not my focus at all. What I really love to do is abstract and, inspired, like you say, with geodes and nature and that sort of thing. But it's nothing, it's not representational, and I don't consider myself an illustrator at all. So I wanted to sort of share that interest with other people in this group. And we do, like, people are always posting, the most crazy stuff, and I just love it. It's a really unique place, and everyone's very supportive. And usually, when I post a YouTube tutorial, I'll post it in the group, and then some people might follow the tutorial and then post what they've made, or they'll be following old tutorials and posting, or they'll be coming up with completely new ideas. A lot of times, sharing their ideas, and sometimes I even, someone will post something that inspires me, and then maybe I'll get into a conversation with them, and if they're okay with it, sometimes I'll even make a YouTube video based on that idea, and get them involved in that. And so I really just like to involve the community members. And something also that's really important to me in the community is that people aren't just like, following the tutorial and trying to make it look just like mine. Because in my mind, I'm not like this amazing artist. I'm just like trying to show ideas, show techniques so that people can make it their own. So that's where that comes in, that, finding creative flow digitally. I want people to be able to find that intuitive art within themselves and be able to follow their own intuition to wherever it takes them, that amazing place where I never would have gone.
What are some of the people in your community who have done specifically or concretely unique and unexpected things that may not be artists per se, but have used your brushes in ways that sort of astounded you?
Well, for instance, there is a lady called Jane Proctor who I did a tutorial based on some of the mandalas that she'd been doing in our group, and she had given me permission and all of that. And I'm always astounded by everything that she posts in our group, because she is super creative, and she's always coming up with these really 3D looking objects that are just like, nothing I ever would have come up with, but it just works, like streams of light and, like, I don't know. It's so I'm always astounded when I see what she does. Or there are people who are like actual oil painters, who are making these most amazing landscapes with my oil brushes that I never would have, I never would have had the skill to do that. So it's interesting, like what you say, that this is kind of enabling people who are not artists per se to really make art, because that's kind of something that's really important to me, that, if you want to be an artist, and if you're making art, then you are an artist. A lot of people will say, well, it doesn't look good, it doesn't look like yours or whoever's. And, they'll always be down on themselves. And I'll just be like, this is your art. It doesn't have to look like someone else's, and it shouldn't, it's yours. So I think there's a lot of gatekeeping and the, elitism that doesn't need to be there when it comes to art and design.
Yeah, and the first and hardest gatekeeper is yourself most of the time. So you're self-gatekeeping. And a lot of people, I think myself included, you consider it a binary choice. I'm either an artist or not an artist, when in fact, it's quite gray. And in fact, we're all artists in a sense. It's just, as you said, who's producing the art and who's not. I have a question on how you actually made the mental leap or psychological leap to selling these brushes. It seems to me that a lot of people who would enter this world consider it hard enough to create digital art in the first place. Then there's another level of, not only am I creating digital art, but I'm going to create brushes to help other people create digital art in that meta sense. So how did you make that psychological leap, not just the practical leap?
Well, I don't know. It didn't really feel like a leap for me, because I've always enjoyed materials and tools more than finished artworks. Like whenever I was a kid, I would do scrapbooking and I would always enjoy setting up the page, but I didn't actually want to put the pictures on it. I just wanted to like make a background. And so I've always enjoyed making tools and then seeing, where it can go. Like it's more like a possibility rather than a finished thing. So I think that's kind of why I enjoy making tools. And for me, it made sense as well because, I have a very intense interest in art, obviously, but I also feel like I have a unique combination that I'm also really interested in the technical side of things, and I have a degree in software development. So it's not something I've ever used, except for in that I really like to fiddle with things and make them work, and so it was just a good combination to just start making brushes to be able to technically fiddle with something that can also make beautiful art.
Yeah, I think some people would be impressed by the level of sophistication of the tooling that you're working with. You have many varieties of brushes to include something on the order of 15 different Gumroad products that you offer. But even one product in particular, I don't know whether it's alcohol ink or another category, but you have something like 159 brush types or different kinds of brushes within that one product. And I'll just name a few of the variations of those brushes underneath that, the sort of subcategories: splashes, splatters, washes, circles, triangles, leaves, branches, flowers, flourishes. It seems like, is there no end?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? That's probably the thing I struggle with the most is editing and making the brush that's small enough to sell, because like currently I'm actually working on a brush set which I hope to release in the next week or so. And the process, always the longest process, is going through this huge folder that I've made of all these different brushes and deciding which ones make the cut and which ones I have to, I have to kill my darlings, like get rid of some of these brushes in order to make the file manageable, in order to not make it overwhelming. And that particular one that you mentioned there is a set of stamps. So I feel like I can get away with a few more when they're stamped. But whenever it's the dynamic brushes, it can get overwhelming once you get over like 30, 40, 50 of those. So I do try to keep it around there. But yeah, it's really hard to kind of rein it in sometimes.
What percentage of your work would you say is driven by your own artistic intuition vis-a-vis, or maybe in combination with, the feedback and conversation you're having in your community and in DMs and just observing other people's work? In other words, when you create a new set of brushes or update your old sets of brushes, what portion of that is coming from sort of an external versus within?
I think it's different. The updates and the new brush sets are different because the updates are almost 100% based on feedback. I do tend to update my brushes fairly often, and a lot of times it'll be because someone mentioned they'd really love a such and such brush in that set, like, and a lot of times it'll be because I'm experimenting, creating a different brush set, and then I decide, well, actually, I can use this technique I'm using now to make brush go in this other set as well. So I'll update brushes that way. When it comes to making new brushes, sometimes it's based on things that people have requested, but I do always try to stay true to what I'm interested in doing. Because, for instance, someone asked for fur brushes, I think, and I just don't do that because I don't draw animals, and I think that would be great, but it's just not something I'm interested in doing, and it doesn't go with my style. So I do try to think, what am I interested in? What do I like to make? And I don't feel like I can make good brushes if it's not something I like to do. So it's based on that, what I'm interested in, what I want, what the kind of art that I want to make. And the process itself of making the brushes, is very convoluted, and it is based on intuition, but it's also just a lot of trial and error, a lot of fiddling with all these different things. And, I'll fiddle with something 100 times and it's, not looking right 100 times and it's super frustrating. But then all of a sudden, the right thing you just hit the right set of settings and all of a sudden it's magical. It just looks perfect. And it's such a rush. I really love that.
On that note, I have a follow-up question there and then 3 burning questions after that. One of the unexpected things, for me at least, as I dove into your work, is one would think you're doing digital art for the output, for the product that you're creating, to share that, to have that, to prove something to yourself. But there's another aspect, which is what happens to you while you're creating the art. So in other words, the relaxation, the lessening of anxiety, which is a reason to make art in the first place. And a lot of people seem to react to your brushes in particular, maybe your work, and as they emulate it, as they do the work, they share with you how it's changing them as a human being and as a creator. I would love to hear you comment on that.
Yes, that's probably what I'm most passionate about in this entire thing. Because like you say, a lot of people, I've had so many DMs with people, so many emails, so many conversations with people talking about how this has helped them with, if they have an illness, a chronic illness or chronic pain or, some sort of disability, someone in their family has a terminal illness, just all sorts of issues like this, that people have told me that doing this artwork has helped them through those things. And it's really important to me, especially the digital aspect of it, because I feel like it opens up the possibility and makes processing, things that we're going through, processing anxiety through art possible for so many more people than would be possible with analog artwork. Because, analog artwork takes a lot of space. It takes a lot of money and, shopping in order to buy all these art supplies. It often has, toxic things in it, like alcohol ink is really, really toxic. I couldn't do that because I have to actually wear a respirator mask when I'm doing it, and I didn't want the fumes in the house with the kids home. So, it takes a lot. It's physically demanding to do analog artwork, and so many people have told me that they're not able to do the sort of artwork that they used to do or that they would like to, for all of these reasons that, they don't have the space, they don't have the art supplies, they're not able to physically. And because of that, digital art has meant so much to them. And, they're opening up this possibility of being able to express themselves when maybe they didn't have that possibility before they found digital art. So I'm super passionate about that. It's really important to me, that this is a way to, process things for people.
It seems like that passion that you've described now twice, you use that word, it sustains you creatively. The question is whether or not you began with that passion at the outset or you discovered it in the process of participating.
I think I discovered it, and it's been sort of during that pivot in 2020 that I told you about, because I did actually switch to more digital art. At that point, I was doing a lot of analog artwork. My kids were in school, and then they were home from school, and suddenly I was not able to do that anymore. So that's kind of where that started. But then I got a lot more interested in it when I was having all of these conversations with people and really finding out how helpful this is for so many, so many people with all these diverse different reasons why they couldn't do regular artwork. And I am passionate about it because there's a lot of neurodiversity in my family. And so, I'm familiar with disabilities, and I feel very passionate about making sure that art is accessible to everyone and available to everyone, because it's anyone who wants it, because it's such an important, way to be able to express yourself without having to use words.
I have talked about that with another guest. Some people are able to express themselves in words, and others prefer and feel that they can access something internally through their visual art in ways that is more powerful, more helpful, helps others more, and so forth. I have a question that's a little less psychological in nature and more practical as we try to be as we try to help inspire creatives actually share their work. You not only share your work on Instagram, but also on YouTube. So I'm curious. I'm curious as to the sort of the virtue of Instagram on the one hand, and what you've both been able to give and potentially touch off in a nice positive feedback circle or virtuous loop on the YouTube side.
I think that for me, Instagram is more like a two-way communication platform where I'm having conversations with people. And on YouTube, it's more like I'm presenting and doing these longer form videos where people can, turn that on and follow along with it. Whereas on Instagram, the videos are short, and it's more like starting a conversation and just like little tidbits of inspiration here and there. So I do really like both platforms in their different ways.
That makes sense. And your YouTube videos are so well done. They've got the camera right above. You use these fast forwarding techniques and so forth to make it easy to watch, easy to follow, and so forth. I have a question that I try to ask everyone that I talk with here on the podcast. Mm-hmm. And I'm actually going to add an element to it because uniquely interested in your take on this. I ask folks what their information diet is, but the element that I'm going to add is something an expression I really like to use, which is, what's your daily rhythm? So you're an artist. Not everyone's an artist, meaning not everyone does it for a living or earns a living, earns a side income like you do. But a lot of us try to access the flow, as you say, the flow, helping creatives access that digitally. So just give us a window into that daily process, and then maybe a sub portion of that is the information diet. Like, where do you go for inspiration other than outside in the UK?
Yeah, well, my days are different. It's not always the same thing. I have kids, and I have a dog and husband, and so a lot of times I'll be distracted in one way or another. But usually I start out my day with Notion. I'm sure you're probably familiar with Notion. That I have like a daily Notion page where I go in there and I sort of do some things that like help me feel a bit more grounded, like journaling and things like that. And then I have a list of links of all the places where I need to go and check for messages and comments and things that I need to respond to, like on YouTube comments or like Instagram DMs or Creative Market messages and all the different places, because I will forget something if I don't have a list in front of me. I do all of that, and it sometimes takes about an hour. And then after that, I will either record a video or work on a brush set that I'm, currently working on, which will take months sometimes. And that's the ideal day, basically. But it's usually very convoluted. Sometimes I'll get on a tangent about something, and then I'll just research something completely irrelevant all day. Or, I'm not very organized. It's something that I'm working on for sure.
Well, I think we've given our Gumroad listeners and your fellow creatives, our fellow creatives, a tremendous amount of inspiration to pursue their own ambitions creatively. Where can people find your work, and what would you want to point them to specifically?
They can find me on Instagram, Alaina Jensen, and on YouTube as well, Alaina Jensen, and also on Facebook. I'm lucky that I have a unique name, so it's just my name everywhere. And something to point you to, I don't know when this will be released, but in the next week or so, I will be releasing a new brush set, which is a fluid art, not alcohol ink, but fluid acrylic art brush set, which I'm very excited about. So that will be released really soon, and I would want people to go and check it out.
Awesome. What gave you the idea to do fluid art, and how did you bring it together?
Well, it's very similar to alcohol ink, and a lot of people have asked for it a lot. And there is already a capability in Procreate called Liquify that you can use to make that type of art, but I wanted to make it look realistic. Yeah, that's a whole nother tangent, but I really wanted to make this sort of like way that it looks like when people are pouring on the canvas and then these cells appear. I wanted to make some brushes that can do that.
Great. Well, thank you, Alaina. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being here. And I can't wait to see, like fluids, all of your inspiration propagate across the creative ecosystem.
Thank you. It's been great to talk to you.
Thanks, Alaina. Talk soon.